Good morning, and we just concluded a Democratic caucus where we remain united in our belief to both put America back to work, get on with the business of creating jobs. Our colleagues across the aisle are in their seventh month without a single job proposal coming forward. We note in our caucus and we applaud the leadership who are participating in the negotiations that 7 times under the Bush administration the debt ceiling was raised. And now the debt ceiling is being held hostage in what can only amount in what I would equate to be a high theater of high-stakes poker. The situation, as difficult as it is alarming, not just because of what will happen with regard to the nation's economy and the global economy, but what will happen to the American people. Because the Republicans are not only by their actions defaulting on our government and global governments, they're defaulting on the family budget, the very pensions, the very mortgages, the credit card interest, the 401ks that are put in jeopardy because of this double daring, not with the president, but with the American people. They seem to think that there's a special few that should be exempted from this process, and Mr. Andrews will address that. But prior to hearing from our distinguished colleague from New Jersey, Vice Chairman of the caucus, Javier Becerra.
Chairman, thank you very much. Pleased to have Mr. Andrews joining us as well. First it was demands, then it was ultimatums. Now what's next? Tantrums? We're not sure where the Republicans intend to take their leadership, but it's certainly looking more and more like Republicans are taking their leadership in 2 different directions. At least it sounds more and more like the House Republicans have 2 different negotiators going to these meetings at the White House. And it certainly seems like some of the Senate Republican negotiators have decided to just listen. At this stage, it's very unclear whether or not Republicans truly meant to negotiate, whether it's because of these memoranda and these statements that are being articulated by some Republicans in the House that just by going to sit at the negotiating table, that was their part of the compromise, and that the president and Democrats would have to do all the other heavy lifting, or whether it's the fact that at this stage, it's unclear if Republicans were ever serious about negotiating the tough choices that had to be made, because it appears more and more that the only thing Republicans were prepared to talk about was putting Social Security and Medicare cuts on the table for negotiation. So to see Republicans twice walk away from negotiations and still, again, make demands, ultimatums, and who knows what's next, it becomes very difficult. Of course, it's not so much the Democrats or the president losing this, it's the American public loses. I suspect soon the markets are going to start to send signals about what happens when you don't have true negotiations. And what we're hoping is that people will finally come to their senses and have that adult moment and say to the American people, we understand that if we allow the government for the first time in its history to default on its obligations, that it will be you, through your mortgage payments, through your line of credit as a small business, through your ability to pay for your kids to go to college and borrow money for a student loan, you're the ones that will pay. And so we'll get to work and get this done before we hit that edge of the cliff. But again, it just depends. If we really have a bona fide partner in these negotiations, and I suspect right now even the Republican leadership in the House is asking each other whether they have partners to negotiate at this stage with the president and with Democrats. With that, we'll turn it over to Mr. Andrews.
Well, good morning. I first want to thank Chairman Larson, Vice Chair Becerra for keeping the members so up to date and so involved in these negotiations. They've really been great in keeping all of us included through their leadership positions. You know, as you travel around the country and listen to the American people, there's a lot of agreement. There's a lot of agreement at this time of disagreement. People agree the country has a jobs crisis. We need to create a lot of jobs and put people back to work. People agree that the idea of considering not paying our bills is a ridiculous and reckless idea, that the debt ceiling should be extended. People agree that the deficit should be reduced in a way that will help keep business climate and interest rates in a positive environment so that our entrepreneurs can create jobs. There's only one disagreement that separates the mainstream of America from the Republican leadership. One question. And that is there a special class of Americans who should be exempted from the sacrifice and effort to lift the country out of this morass? Is there one group of people whose claim is so powerful, whose morality is so profound, that they and they only should be exempted from the effort to lift us out of this problem? We would say no. Every American in some way should participate in helping solve this broad and deep national problem in some equitable way. But they would say that there is a special class of Americans. If you manage a hedge fund, you deserve a special tax break, and that's sacrosanct. If you're an ethanol distributor and you've got the taxpayers underwriting the growth of your business, that's sacrosanct. If you're a millionaire or a billionaire, the idea that you would pay just a little more to help lift us out of this morass is just not something that can be even considered. I don't think the American people are where Mr. Cantor is on this question, where Senator McConnell evidently is on this question. I don't think they think there's a special class of Americans who, above all others, have a right to be exempted from the effort to lift us out of this problem. Democrats are part of the American mainstream. We understand and believe that this problem must be solved, and it must be solved in a way that's equitable and broad. We're waiting for the Republicans to join us. I hope that today is the day that they do.
Thanks, Rob. Questions? Thanks a lot.
Yesterday, the president said that he's willing to, and prepared to, almost eager maybe, to take on parts of the Democratic base, presumably you all on this deal. How does that make you feel, and what's your reaction?
Well, we always welcome the engagement of the president, and I think that's the spirit of his comments. And our leadership relayed to us what transpired in the meeting, and everything that the president said was consistent with the great values that we have in both Social Security and Medicare. But unlike our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, he continues to reach out and continues to say that everything should be on the table. The more he reaches out, the more they walk away from a discussion with the American people. And this is what's really disturbing, is that this is not only about the United States. It's not only about the world economy, of which we are the epicenter. It's about the household economies of every single American and their disregard and their willingness to play politics. Who knows how far they will take this, how far to the precipice. We've seen this act just recently, and we've seen it play out before in 2008. And so I think it's incumbent, you would hope, on the Republicans to come to the table and bargain in good faith. We can only hope that that happens instead of holding the American people hostage in this situation.
Mr. Watson, is there
Yeah.
a concern from the Democrats that the president's message at the negotiating table could undercut your party, especially when it comes to Medicare changes? There was the idea that the president would support raising the eligibility age of Medicare.
Here's what Jim Clyburn, Chris Van Hollen, Nancy Pelosi, and Steny Hoyer have said. in all of these discussions, there can be no solution. There is nothing on the table unless everything is on the table. And in that context, members of our caucus, though they have deep and abiding concerns about Social Security and Medicare, respect what the President is doing. We have not seen the details with regard to that, but we inherently trust our leadership and the President to do the right thing.
If I could add.
Yes. Go ahead, Javier.
We hope the public and everyone else, including our Republican colleagues, will remember that when it comes to programs like Medicare, Democrats came to the plate. We offered and passed, not according to Democrats, but according to the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan referee on fiscal matters here in Congress, $500 billion worth of savings from Medicare. That's far more than we see our Republican colleagues offering without jeopardizing benefits to seniors. And so we found ways going after some of the excess, the waste, the replication of services in Medicare to make sure that we could take away from Medicare without taking away benefits. And so any conversation about Medicare or Social Security, in the eyes of most Democrats, is one that we will examine very closely, because as I have said before with regard to Social Security, Americans have contributed $13 trillion since 1935 to the system, to the Social Security system, through their payroll tax contributions. They have used in benefits $12 trillion. That's $1 trillion surplus in hard dollars, plus the $1.5 trillion that's been earned on the interest on those hard dollars that have been deposited in treasury certificates. That's $2.5 trillion. Why should seniors, through cuts to Social Security, pay for deficits caused by Bush tax cuts to wealthy folks and to unpaid for wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? Why should Medicare have to face cuts that go to benefits when we've already put $500 billion in savings on the table as Democrats? So we understand what the President is trying to do. He's trying to get the Republicans to sit down and negotiate in good faith. If it requires talking about everything, we've been, from the very beginning, ready to discuss that. But for Republicans to say that it was enough for them to come to the table, and that's their part, is coming to sit at the table, that's not real negotiation.
If they're more willing to protect hedge fund recipients and owners, we're in it for the American people. And I think the American public increasingly sees the enormous disparity that exists between the two. And in this time, when we're in wars on two fronts and engaged in a third, and with the recovery being as fragile as it is, to say that one class, one group of people are exempt and held sacrosanct, as Mr. Andrews said, we just think is flat unfair. And what the American people desire most from their government is fairness. Yes?
Senator McConnell just minutes ago called the talk smoke and mirrors, says offers on the table will only amount to billions, not the billions that Democrats are saying. Can you tell us what you're offering that perhaps might be above this?
What we're offering?
Yeah, he says
well, as someone who voted for a clean debt limit, as someone who believes that 7 times during the Bush administration, this Congress voted in favor of a debt increase because they understood the responsibility of defaulting. The Republicans, it seems, and Mitch McConnell, from what we understand, doesn't say much at the meetings. We know he does an awful lot of blocking over in the Senate on bills that should be coming forward. We're, in the House, always concerned. We don't understand why the Senate doesn't pass a bill and send it over to us. I understand the politics of it and Harry Reid having to deal with Mitch McConnell and not being able to get 60 votes. But honestly, do you know anyone in any 5th grade class across this country who believes that when they see a vote in the paper, 54-46, vote loses? Understands that? That's what's going on. What we offer is to continue to be at the table and to continue to make sure that the American household isn't put in jeopardy by their reckless actions.
Can I got it. If that's truly what Senator McConnell said, I feel like I'm on a playground. This is amazing. We're but a couple of weeks away from watching the markets send us a signal that that family that's in the process of buying a home may end up paying more for that mortgage than they ever expected, simply because a political game is being played by some people about how to deal with the debts, the bills that this country ran up. This isn't about future spending. This is about covering the bills from the past, mostly the bills from the Bush administration. For any leader to stand and say this is smoke and mirrors when you're sitting at the White House, gosh, if they're playing with smoke and mirrors at the White House, where then can we go to have a meaningful conversation for the American people that will resolve what has become a crisis? I got to believe that the American public is expecting far more from our leaders, and I have to pray that our leaders are serious about negotiating and not putting up these smoke screens about smoke and mirrors being used in these negotiations. I would, if the American public were to read or hear that, I would not blame them for not having confidence in the leaders who make those statements that we can get this done.
Congressman Larson, do you agree with President Obama that a bigger deal is better, even if that means cuts to COLAs for Social Security beneficiaries and deeper cuts in Medicare are on the table, or would you prefer to see a smaller deal that takes those two programs only?
Well, we would prefer to see our markets calm, our people back to work, and our vital programs with regard to their benefits intact. That's what this caucus has been focused on, and we have sent that message repeatedly to anyone who will listen. And I think the Vice Chair, who knows the issue of Social Security probably better than anyone in Congress, we agree that in broad parameters, it's always important to talk about how we strengthen and improve and enhance and put back, as we did in the Health Care Act, and strengthen Medicare. But when it comes to benefits for its people in Social Security and Medicare, we have drawn a line. Yes?
Are you prepared to vote against some kind of deal to raise the government if one comes before the House? And further, can you just talk a little bit about sort of the conflict that you feel in terms of wanting to stick to the principles, but also wanting to support the president and power who's of the party on this issue, even though you're in the minority?
Well, first of all, yeah, that's I think that's the most important question, and we would only wish that the Republicans would hold President Obama and provide him with the same kind of respect and accommodation that Democrats in our leadership provided for George Bush. And with regard to the president, he is our president. He is our leader. Yes, it can be frustrating to several members of our caucus when we see only one-sided negotiations and only the president willing to put everything on the table. And it becomes even more frustrating when you see the Republican leadership leave the table, walk out, say this is not possible, and most recently claim that their only skin in the game is that they will ultimately agree that we have to raise the debt ceiling, and that's their compromise. The debt ceiling that Mr. Andrews and Mr. Becerra have pointed out, 3/4 of which was their making, and 7 times during the Bush administration it was increased.
There's a beautiful word in Spanish. It's very simple. It's ganas. By the way, G-A-N-A-S. And it simply means desire, but it means far more than desire because it speaks to your inner being willingness to do something, to have more than the desire but the will to get it done. Right now, I think Republicans lack ganas to really get this done because I think they believe they can force upon the president and the American people their will and their agenda. And on occasions, it's appeared that they might succeed. Whether or not Democrats would vote on a debt ceiling increase, I think it's been answered pretty dramatically and on more than one occasion. We've been prepared to move this country forward and not put at risk the full faith and credit of the United States of America and that mortgage of that American family and that line of credit for that small business and that opportunity to go to college for that young student for a long time. We've been ready. We've also been ready, and the president's has made it very clear, to engage in a monumental compromise on how to deal with deficits. We could today vote to end the crisis that Wall Street and the markets are beginning to fear, and that Americans on Main Street will soon begin to fear. It doesn't take having to come to August 2nd. We could deal with that. So Democrats have been ready. We're not the ones that are making the ultimatums. We're not the ones that have walked away from the negotiations more than once. And we're not the ones that are calling this process smoke and mirrors. We're ready. The American people expect us to be ready. And we're ready for that adult moment whenever our Republican counterparts agree to come to the table.
The president said that he would not be for any short-term deal. We are united in our caucus and stand behind our president that we will not be for any short-term deal.
And just to follow up, would either of you be prepared to vote against a debt deal if it comes before the House?
You have to see. We have to see what the details are of the deal. And I think again that's the difference. You know, on one side we've seen, that there's no discussion here. It's it's high theater, but little action whatsoever. As the vice chair has said, we could vote on this tomorrow. And if you can't come to agreements, you would hope that you were able to. You would hope that the nation would be able to make strides here. You would hope that we could begin to focus on putting America back to work. We haven't seen a single bill yet with respect to that, other than these platitudes about how this is going to create jobs. Where in the entire Bush administration, under all the tax cuts, were the jobs created?
So are you expecting that the way that this will be resolved most likely at this point is through some kind of a market disruption or even a default that forces?
We certainly hope not. We think that, as Javier said, we could take action on this tomorrow. We could take action on this tomorrow. You could take action on this tomorrow, and you could set aside all differences and then take up in separate tranches. You could take up the issues as they relate to the deficit. You could take up the issues as they relate to the budget and job creation. All of those. But the idea was they thought, well, this is a moment that you could seize upon to bring the country together. Instead, it's turned into a moment where the Republicans are playing double dare with the American people.
They're going to have to be forced into it though by some kind of external.
Some of you are veterans. You've gone through years of Congress. When have you seen this play before, where we're holding up the full faith and credit of the country? You're making the markets have jitters. You're making the bond market say, maybe we need to increase rates on any treasury that's put out for sale. When have you seen this done before? Democrats haven't done this, and this year Democrats have said we're willing to deal with deficits and we're ready to be responsible on not defaulting on the country's past bills. it's Republicans who have not only been willing to force this to the edge, but it's Republicans, whether it's our colleague Michelle Bachmann or whether it's, I think, Sarah Palin and others have said that they are prepared to vote no regardless of what might be negotiated. It's only the Republicans who have said we're going to vote no regardless of what the deal is. And so it's one of these things that's tough. At some point, you feel like you're negotiating with a mirror. And we need to see Republicans step to the plate and give their leadership the license to negotiate for them, not to negotiate and go back to the members, find that the members are about to mutiny, and then the leadership has to come back to the negotiating table and say, what we thought we had agreed to, we can't. And then now all of a sudden you seem to be seeing the Republican leaders not necessarily on the same page together. So, it's time to get this act together and get it done.
We hope external forces do come into play. We certainly would hope that these chambers of commerce would step up. We certainly hope, and we have heard from Wall Street, but I think they have to be more vociferous and more present in terms of the looming, impending danger. I don't see an economist around that hasn't indicated that this would be a disaster. And I will say that the Republicans seem to acknowledge that the debt limit has to be raised. They're now saying, I believe, and oh, by the way, that's our compromise. It's both arrogant and insulting that their compromise is that they'll raise the debt ceiling for the debt that they created under President Bush.
There's some chatter in your rank and files about pushing for a clean debt limit vote. If no, you're going to increase. What is the leadership support if you don't?
Well, I think that's among the options that would exist out there. We've already taken that vote once, and I believe it had over 161 votes. The question is, and God only knows, certainly John Boehner can't decipher where his caucus is, and I don't know who can at this point and what they're willing to do. They're being pulled by their presidential candidates in one direction and by their internal politics in another direction. So it's hard for us to forecast what would happen, but certainly that would be one of the options.